afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina, and I'll be the MC for this afternoon. Today's event is part of a series of mental health and well-being forums, where we will explore relevant topics with the help of expert panel members. So today's topic is constructive resilience amongst migrant women. Our two first panelists are here from Ishar. So I'll start with our first panelist, Parisa Faramarzi. Parisa is a social worker working within settlement services supporting refugee and migrant families and in family and domestic violence support services. She has experience in early childhood and primary teaching and youth work. Her passion lies in empowering individuals and communities and advocating for social justice and equality. Parisa is currently working at Ishar Multicultural Women's Health Services as a social worker. So that's Parisa's background. And now our next panelist, who's also from Ishar, Ms. Samar Mouawad. Samar is a counselor and creative arts therapist and a registered member of the Professional Association for Creative Arts Therapists in Australia, New Zealand, and Asia. She graduated with a master's degree in creative arts therapy from Murdoch University in Perth. She has experience working with individuals and in group therapy. She follows a culturally responsive, trauma-informed, and patient-centered approach using art for therapeutic, non-artistic purposes. Her interests include working with women from a multicultural background who experienced or works with youth and adults with grief, anxiety, self-esteem, and other psychological difficulties. Samar has a bachelor degree with honors in speech pathology and had the privilege to work as a speech therapist in Dubai in the first governmental early intervention program called the Dubai Early Childhood Development Center. She was part of a multidisciplinary team and worked closely with family counselors to empower families of children with disabilities. Please welcome our two first presenters.
Hi everyone, I'm Parisa and thank you Dina for the introduction. I'll give a quick explanation of my role at Ishar and then I'll pass it on to Samar. So as Dina mentioned, I'm a social worker at Ishar Multicultural Women's Health Services, working within the settlement program known as the Settlement Transition Service. And that the aim of the program is to support new refugee and migrant families who have arrived in Australia to navigate the systems that they will be working in, operating in, and kind of work through some of the challenges that come up for families who first move into a new country. And I also work within the Family and Domestic Violence Service, so working with women who are experiencing family and domestic violence at different levels. So yeah, we're there as a culturally responsive service. We work with many different cultural backgrounds, and it's very needs-based. So when families or women, we predominantly work with women. So when women come to us, based on the programs that can kind of work with them, we'll support them as needed. So Samar and I work quite closely because often there's a lot of emotional, mental health, well-being challenges that come up. So we kind of try to create a wraparound service for the women we work with, where I kind of work with some of the practical challenges, or also known as some of the psychosocial challenges that come up, and then Samara looks at it from a different angle. So I'll pass it on to
I haven't had one of these in ages. Sorry. No, I'm fine. Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. So my name is Samar. I'm from Lebanon. I've been here for 5 years and I've been working with Ishar for 3. As Parisa said, I work with women from a multicultural background who are experiencing, who have experienced family domestic violence. I also work with clients from who are suffering with mental health issues and youth clients as well. As Parisa said, sometimes we work with the same clients for different reasons. Usually, for example, Parisa sees the client first and then does the risk assessment because we don't work with clients with high risk. We work, and then when the risk assessment is done and the client requests counseling, then she comes to me and then the work starts. You might see me use my phone, but I'm not like texting or anything. It's just like so I don't forget or miss any important information. So basically, all the women at Ishar come from a multicultural background. So they're either even if they're born here, but they are coming from a multicultural background. And we have lots of migrants, lots of refugees and asylum seekers. So what does that mean in terms of culture? Because we all know where we come from is like a collectivist culture. It cares more about like the community and the sense of community and the compliance in the community. Compliance sometimes mean in conformity, means it means like being compliant with anything that is happening inside that culture. Sometimes we might not even be okay with what's happening in our culture, but because we're part of the community, we're just gonna be conforming and complying with it. And the perfect example would be domestic violence, for example. If my mother-in-law or my mother experienced FDV, it's like normalized if it's happening to me in a way. So what happens when a client is a migrant is moving to Australia? There's a big shift from the collectivist culture to the individualistic culture that is here, which is concerned more about the personal interest of individuals rather than the community. And even the way we talk about ourselves in the community, it's about the role that we have. Like, I'm a good mother, or I'm a good sister, or I'm a good housewife. And in an individualistic culture, it's more about the actual personal traits of the person. Like, you hear them say things like, I am smart or I am kind. Okay, so there's a big difference there as well. What happens with that, once someone moves, they're like in a new culture, they have to conform to something new now. The consequence of that would be isolation because we're not used to that. And there's lack of support, like they can't find the support that they need. You have no idea how many women who come to Ishar have suffered like for months before actually finding Ishar. There's the language barrier as well, like especially coming with like no language, no English whatsoever, and coming here. And then even like when there's interpreters, sometimes it's not that easy to find the language. And then interpreters are anyway, like it's another issue with interpreters. So there's that, there's the financial difficulties as well that we go through. And then there's even like how do I raise my children? Do I raise them like there's a new culture now? Do I raise them as per the new culture, or do I still raise them as per my culture, my religion, my background? So there's a lot of changes that are happening with someone being either displaced or choosing to actually be here on their own. So people think that once you're here, then your trauma is like, like done. Like I'm displaced, my country is going through war. Once I'm here, then everything is fine. But no, it's not. Like there's a whole other kind of, difficulties and traumas that we go through once we're here. And obviously that would affect all these issues, and the consequences will affect our mental health. There's a lot of anxiety, lot of depression. There's that sense of loss as well. It can be losing your family home. It doesn't have to be. So basically, grief and loss, it's not just about losing a person. It's about losing a house, a pet, a phase in your life that you used to feel, good about. But now that you're here, you lost that. Losing that contact, losing the food. Actually, how like I spent like 3 years here before knowing that there's one good Lebanese place that actually reminds me of my home, and we know how food is like a big thing is in our culture. So there's a lot of loss. There's a lot of anxiety, stress. Sometimes if a woman is pregnant and coming here, she might have had postnatal depression as well because she don't know how to, because she doesn't have her support system here to help her, with the baby. There's a lot of conflict within the family because of the how do I raise my children now? Yeah, I think I've covered everything. It took me some time not to look at my phone, so that's good. Um, yeah, so, and then from that comes the physical health issues because when I'm stressed, I'm not sleeping well. I have to take care of my kids on my own sometimes because maybe my husband is still in Iran or, in a different country where he needs to support us from there. So I'm here on my own doing a single mom work, for example, not sleeping well. And then that starts affects your physical health. And then not sleeping well affecting your physical health will automatically affect your mental health because the mind and the body are connected. Once the mind is working against the body and vice versa, then your mental health and your mental well-being and your quality of life would be negatively affected.
So, we just heard a little bit about some of the challenges that comes from the shift in culture of going from a collectivist to an individualist, but we also want to acknowledge that there's so much resilience in women and in families in general, of those who do migrate and go to a different country. And I think sometimes we can look at someone who might not speak any English or might have many barriers that exist for them. And, there's this assumption that, oh, they won't know how to do something. But actually, when we think about it, take a step back, this person has probably gone to multiple different countries, gone through multiple processes to get to where they are. And I think that in itself is a testament to their resilience, to their strength. And I think this is something we try to highlight because it's really hard for some of especially the women, to be able to stand up for themselves, to kind of ask for things on their own. Because sometimes they come from cultures where that's not normalized, or women are not allowed to go and ask questions or question things or ask for their rights, really. So that's where we kind of try to advocate for some of our clients. So the resilience that we see every day is huge. There's kind of this. I think sometimes we look at it as, they're surviving, they're doing well, they're okay. But actually, a lot of the women, although there's so much adversity, so much trials, we can see that they're holding on to hope, because it's like, okay, I've had all of these experiences. It's been hard, or even, I have experienced even discrimination in Australia while I've been here. But then what is it that I can do to improve my life and the lives of my children? And that's a very common pattern and trait that we see in the women we work with. And it's so valuable because we can see that, even though there's so many challenges, they're still ready to show strength and to show resilience. And I think that it can be a hard balance to practice, because sometimes the challenges can be overpowering. For example, when there is an experience of family and domestic violence, who do I go to when my home and my safe haven is not safe? Or where do I go when I don't have enough money to buy food for my family? So there's multiple things that need addressing. But I think what we try to do, or try to take a step back, that we're not doing it. All we do is really guide the process and walk alongside these women to be able to build that capacity to do it for themselves, because they all have that capacity. It's just a matter of navigating it, because the systems are very complex. The legal systems are quite complex. The health system is very complex. So it's just kind of breaking that down to see what can we do together. It's more of a partnership. We kind of accompany one another to be able to kind of address some of those needs. And that takes immense resilience. And I think it takes time to get those things done. But I think in that sense, it's there's still hope. And I think that element of empowering someone to hold on to that hope is where our job is, I think. So yeah, so I think sometimes it can be back and forth. We take 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, but it's all a matter of kind of just navigating it, figuring it out as we go, and just try to kind of think about what could come next. But I think yeah, some of the ways we try to address resilience is looking at economic well-being, looking at mental well-being, physical well-being, and then sometimes there's these extra things that we don't think about, but it's actually cultural practices. Coming here, sometimes it's different. Like, for example, in a country where the woman listens to their parents until they get married, and then they come here and they have their husband to go by. So I think that kind of adds extra complexities. Or coming here and you have a set of way you parent, but parenting looks different, or we're told to parent in a different way. So then how do you kind of hold on to what you know and then try to kind of fit in or do what you're told is right, for the fear of losing your child or figuring that out. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of education involved, and a lot of work around, that raising of awareness of, okay, these are the systems that we work in. But I think what stays consistent is that strength and resilience. And I think the practical things and the mental well-being that comes around it just tries to address those different aspects so that they are able to flourish and keep moving forward instead of feeling stagnant or feeling like there's no support. Because also, we come from places where we have family, and then all of a sudden we're in a place where there's no friends, no family, no social network even. Where do I go if I want to hang out with somebody? So then there's social spaces that we have to kind of encourage that civic participation in the community, looking at gaining further education, further employment. So I think that's where we kind of try to encapsulate that resilience. It exists. It's just a matter of bringing it out of and actually reminding the person, because it's there, but you do have it. When things are hard, just remember that you are very strong. I also come from a refugee background, so I've seen that in my family, in my parents, and to see it over and over again, it means there's things that are not being addressed, but then how do we raise this awareness within the systems? So I think my role is advocating within those systems. When people are when they hit a wall, it's like, okay, how can we acknowledge this? How can we address this together? Which is really important because of language barriers, sometimes those needs are not met, but it's possible, but someone doesn't know how to do that for themselves. So that's kind of where I come in. But we'll go a bit into our roles and, the approaches that we use as we speak. So I'll just pass it back.
Okay. So technically, I'm just gonna be talking now about what the client, once we're in the counseling room, what's happening there. Yeah. So basically, what does the client bring to therapy when they decide that they want to do counseling? So first of all, there's a lot of stigma around mental health and counseling itself, oh, it's for sick people, or does that mean that I'm crazy, or we hear those words. So there's a lot of psychoeducation there about, what being in therapy means, how even the therapist has a therapist. So just normalizing actually, being in the counseling room and in counseling sessions. And then there's the client when they come, especially from a migration background or refugee, they're in survival mode. So they're like basically, okay, I need to put food on the table. Like this is like very secondary for me. Maybe my doctor told me I should be here. I don't know how much this is gonna work. So this is where they are, and it's totally understandable because, like, yeah, like if a doctor with like 15 years of experience in Iran is not able to practice being a doctor here because of, you know, like the accreditation, etc., then you're gonna have to worry about like what kind of job you're going to do here to be able to provide food for your family. There's a lot of also normalization of domestic violence, and that can come from, as I said, that compliance within the community about like, yeah, that happened to your sister or that happened to your mother, and that's okay. And they come with that, like, oh, he did not slap me, or no, he did not do that. But then once we start psychoeducation about what domestic violence actually is, then they will be like, oh, okay, you know, like there's more than just like being kicked or slapped or than that. And sometimes that means she might be even more isolated. Like she's not just isolated by being in this country, she might be even isolated within her own family, because now she's like, okay, what do I do with that? Where do I go with that? Especially if she's dependent on her husband. And there's a lot of shame and guilt as well, because especially like when like I'm here, for example, and my family in Lebanon now, like there's a lot of things happening in Lebanon. So I'm like, why do I get to feel safe and not my family? So there's a lot of guilt around that as well. So this is something that we address usually in therapy. What I need to be as a counselor is I need to be an effective multicultural service provider. I cannot just be, you know, myself. I have to know who this person is, what baggage they are bringing with them in therapy, where they're from, their gender, their role, their socioeconomical status. Was there war? How did they come here? Did they live in a refugee camp for some time or not? Do they speak English? Do they not speak English? How was their experience coming here with other service providers? Because that can be traumatizing, like when they're not taken seriously because they're not speaking the language, for example. We had a lot of clients who lost faith in, you know, the system here, or like service providers, because of their experience, bad experiences. So that's something that I should be doing as a multicultural service provider. I have to be aware of my own biases and my own values, so I don't enforce them or force them on my client coming from a different background. I have to trust my client and what they want and what they need, instead of I know better than you. Even like that relationship is like an equal relationship, which is something very new for women, especially, like to be like, you know how we like put doctors like they're gods almost, right? They're, but yeah. So this is how people, like women, come to sessions, like with that that idea of, oh, she's just gonna tell me what to do and I'm just gonna do it, which is not the case, because this is her session, this is her therapy. She needs to put her own goals. Obviously I'm gonna be helping her, but she needs to know that it's an equal relationship. And this is where it actually starts, that empowerment of women here in that, even in that sense. It is person-centered, obviously, no judgment, empathy, congruence, unconditional positive regards for the client. What else? I think I've covered everything. And mainly the goals of therapy would be, as I said, as Parisa talked about resilience, it's to actually acknowledge that resilience and how strong are we to actually be doing that, to actually leave our home country, start from scratch, finding new jobs. Like it's like commendable. It's like so empowering for me to see women who don't speak English, but they actually like decided to do this and come here, and still I can still see hope in their eyes. Like it's so powerful, it's so beautiful. And at the same time, there's that double-edged sword with resilience. So for example, it's a very recent example how I'm more worried about my family than my family is, because they're like, oh, we're used to that. It happens. We don't know. And that's fine. But it's not fine. We can't be getting used to trauma and war and be okay with it. So that's how resilience sometimes can be like negative, like affecting us in a way where, okay, I'm just gonna accept anything that is gonna happen to me, and it's fine. We got used to it. So we actually work on that as well. We do work on it's a strength-based approach, like reminding the client about how strong she is, what are her strengths for her to be able to be here. Because when things are happening, it's not that easy to actually remember how strong you are or what your strengths are, especially when you're going through a lot of changes. We try to find the support system as well here. Because it's totally different from being back home. My family is there. So who can I actually trust here? Who I can rely on? And we start actually building that support system. We work a lot on boundaries within the community as well, especially if a woman decides to leave her abusive relationship, she might be judged by her own community. So that's something that we actually work on for her to be able to be like, no, like that's not okay. Like I cannot stay in this relationship. And we get a lot of those clients because they're scared of losing the community. Then they actually sometimes stay in the relationship. So there's a lot of work on boundaries. And boundaries is a new word for like, for us because we don't have it. So that's another thing. We usually do either individual counseling or group counseling. And in the group counseling, there's a lot of support because she can see other women going through the same thing. So there's like an empowerment there. Oh, okay, it's not me going through this. The shared experience can actually, show you like, oh, wait, so this person was here before me and look where she is now. She has a job. She has she's happy here. She actually knows her rights. She knows the system more. So it's like showing what you can be in few years as well. And sometimes it can be like showing you your blind spots when you're too into the trauma or too into the problem. You cannot see from a different angle. But then you have someone else in the group who would be like, oh, maybe if you do this, then that would happen. So it's always a good idea to be in a group with people, women, especially women, sharing their lived experiences. I use creative arts therapies, which is the use of art for pure therapeutic purposes. So I'm not an art teacher. I'm a therapist. I'm a psychotherapist using art. My client doesn't have to be an artist herself. And it works perfectly with multicultural clients and women because English is not their first language. So sometimes, even if she wants to write in her own language, because we have creative writings or poetry in the session, then it's not about me to understand what she's writing. It's about her own process and how this is making her feel when she's actually exploring or externalizing her trauma or her feeling on a piece of paper or in an object or in a music or in a song. And that could be like a bridge to home. Like if there's a specific song, for example, that makes you feel something, that would be like the closest thing that you can get to home, for example. So that's basically in a nutshell what we do. Sorry if I'm taking too much time. I'm gonna let Parisa now talk about her role.
I'll be
Yeah.
super fast. So I'll try not to repeat some of the things because some of the I guess things that Samar described is also what our social workers do at the organization, but instead of a therapeutic context, we look at the practical aspects of the work. So I guess the social work workers at Ishar, our main job is advocacy. So we manage cases to get to or achieve goals that the women set for themselves, and there's a lot of advocacy. So I think one of the main things we've realized that it kind of could bridge that gap if it's done quite a bit is raising awareness within government agencies, raising awareness within non-government agencies. So we often talk to other service providers about these extra barriers that exist for women who come from migrant refugee backgrounds. And so in goal setting, in addressing needs, we look a lot at working in an I guess, empowering approach, looking at strengths. So really actually bringing those strengths out. So, because once we do that, then the women know, actually, I can do this. I've got this. This is within me. This is what I've got. And it really brings out this courage to actually do things that they might not otherwise. For example, leaving an abusive relationship, or getting a job, or going to university for the first time, or actually going and getting the degree validated to be able to work while being a mother, or whatever that looks like, or getting their driver's license. So I guess as social workers, we look at all of these different aspects that can build independence within the woman, or build that extra confidence and courage for them to actually keep taking those steps, because we don't work with them for forever. We work with them for short periods of time. So within the longest we work with someone is a couple of years. So then how do we help each other, and how do we help them to build capacity? And I think that's just more learning alongside each other rather than doing it for them. So often I try to do things and explain what I'm doing, so that next time they're able to do that for themselves, or they know how to do it, or where to go to get help. So I think that's kind of that's where we work very similarly, but also like different way of working. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, and I know we're conscious of time. We were going to share a little bit about other services at Ishar, but we can either do it, we can have conversations, or there's also our website that has all the information and services on there. So it's just ishar.org. So so if anyone would like to have a look, you're welcome to. .au.
Thank you to both Parisa and Samar. So educational. I mean, I certainly have learned a lot just listening to what you do, and the support that this organization, Ishar, provides to migrant women. The psychosocial support. So you've got psychology and social support, which is fantastic. So thank you for enlightening us. I think most of us know at least one migrant woman, if not more, or are a migrant woman ourselves here today. So we really could relate to some of the concepts that you shared and the challenges that migrant women have when they're displaced from their homeland. So thank you very much.